Hey everybody, John here with the KrakCast. I'm here together with Josh and Dave. Dr. Mike is out this week for unknown reasons. He sent a text message like right before we were going to start, said he couldn't make it. I don't know if that cause for concern, Dave?
International man of mystery, Mike.
Possibly. A last-minute withdrawal.
Well, it's Sunday as we record this. Tomorrow is Halloween. 2 days from now is... No, wait a second. Tomorrow's Halloween. Yeah, Tuesday is All Saints' Day. Normally, as I remember All Saints' Day, November 1st here, it's always a rainy, miserable day most of the time. But this week it seems that we're going to be a nice autumn, leafy, prematurely dark day, Josh.
I seem to remember 2015 was a very warm All Saints' Day.
It happens, but I mean, more often than not, I associate the holiday with rain and mud.
Well, because it's the time of year, yeah. I have to say, of course, when the weather is nice, that's excellent news for the Polish police, because there's probably less likelihood of multiple pile-ups on the roads.
True. Just really quickly about Halloween, don't want to get into it too much, because last year we recorded a special episode about how Halloween was becoming a big deal in Poland. More kids at schools somehow celebrating it. It's in shops everywhere, in supermarkets.
Explain its Irish origins, John.
Why don't you do that?
It's based on the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, which the Catholic Church replaced in the 8th century with All Saints' Day to get us off the old paganism. Basically, it's much like St. Patrick's Day in the fact that as a good Catholic country, we forgot about it too for a long time. In Samhain, back in the day, they'd light bonfires and dress up in costumes to ward off ghosts. But when we realised the commercial appeal of dressing up and trick-or-treating and all that from movies, that became a huge tradition as well.
We got a little bone to pick, let's say, on this Halloween. I'll explain this. Let me get your take on this, guys. So the place, the complex where I live, there's a Facebook group, right? This is not uncommon. And a year ago, last Halloween, I posted, hey, why don't we do something for the kids? Anybody who's interested in having their kids dress up and go trick-or-treating, put your name on this list. And then, we'll send the kids around. And it was a big hit, actually. There was about 15, I think maybe almost 20 people took part. So the kids could dress up. They could go around the apartment blocks and knock on the right doors. And candy would be waiting for them. And it was great. Everybody had a good time.
Demanding sweets with menaces.
About 2 weeks ago, and I remember this was my idea, about 2 weeks ago in the same Facebook group, this woman posts, she goes, after last year's success, I want to suggest that we do it again. Woo! And, add your name to this list. And she created a doc. And I feel like I was robbed of my, pride of authorship.
Oh, you're sensitive to it.
Well, this is my thing. It was my idea.
You feel like the NHS or something, every time you walk out your apartment, everyone should be clapping because
it would be nice.
I think people know you set it up the first time.
It would be nice.
She thought it would be weird to pay tribute. The tribute is they're doing it again, dude.
Halloween stealer.
He's prissy little.
Yeah. But what were we talking about? Oh, Halloween in Poland. We're coming off of 2 years of COVID, but this year I didn't see so many ads for the clubs and bars usually have some kind of dress up party, Halloween party. I didn't see that this year. Maybe because it's on a Monday.
I don't know, man.
I think they always manage to do it kind of like the nearest weekend. I think I did see a few, last night there was a few people, dressed in macabre fashion wandering the streets. Although I didn't hear much in the way about whether there were parties.
It's not still a thing though, is it? Trick or treating. Don't do it anywhere really. Still.
But people like to dress up, but like we were talking about when we did the show last year, it's just the enthusiasm for Halloween has no focus. People don't know what to do.
Yeah, I know.
Where to go.
What I'm generally saying is, unless you approve with a Facebook book group inside a certain building, if you dress your kid up as a vampire, knocked on someone's door looking for sweets, they'd probably call the cops on you.
Yeah, but people, once they know how to do it, I think they enjoy it. The kids love it, but it's never going to catch on big time. But it's too bad because the kids like it.
Support, John. This could be your life's work, pouring your heart and soul into getting every kid in this country the chance to knock on people's doors in the cold, wintry, wet, muddy October night, asking for sweets.
I know what to do with my life now. Thank you, Dave. Let's move on. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how the Jagiellonian University here in Krakow, they suspended in-class meetings going fully remote, well, actually almost fully remote, to save money because they have this monstrous energy bill they simply cannot pay or would rather avoid, and that's why they were going remote. And we speculated that maybe the same thing would spread to the private sector. Maybe businesses would shorten their hours in an effort to reduce their energy costs. Well, we learned this week that's exactly what's happening. The supermarket chain called Netto, which is not that big in Krakow, but it's big in the rest of the country. They announced that they're going to have limited hours, again, in an effort to try to save money on lighting and whatnot. And there's speculation that even the big boys like Lidl and Biedronka could do the same thing. When you have that many stores, saving a bit of money in each store multiplied by hundreds of stores, it's significant savings. Guys, what do you think? Is that the direction we're headed now?
Well, I guess it is, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a little bit intrigued by this because I suspect that one of the biggest costs, aside from staffing, that big retail outlets, supermarkets have is refrigeration. And it's the kind of in-store refrigerators where customers browse around and then they open them and then they pull stuff out and either remember to or don't remember to close the door afterwards. And but the thing is, I mean, those refrigerators have to be on all the time. I can only assume that the power consumption when the shop is open and people are like either leaving the doors open or even just the act of opening the door for a few seconds to withdraw a packet of fish fingers or whatever kind of, substantially increases the
I don't think lights cost that much.
Lights are very little these days.
Refrigeration,
yeah. Don't know what else Netto's dealing with. The recruitment side, I'm sure this is something to do with staffing, to be honest with you.
Also possible.
It's very possible there are other kind of reasons. They might be having a real hard time. It's not a good sign for a supermarket to be reducing its hours. It's one of those businesses, isn't it? When you're open, you're making money. When you're not, But
look at it this way. We had the Sunday trading ban, and they dealt with that. They simply crammed 7 days of shopping into 6 days. If they can do that, why can't they cram 10 hours of shopping into 8 or 9?
You ever see them in like a bar or a restaurant used to open during the day and then they start open at night and then all of a sudden they're closed 2 days a week, and they're telling themselves it's to reduce staff costs and all that, but it's usually the sign of a debt spiral. I'm just suspicious, that's all. I might be wrong. But look, overall, I think there is an interesting discussion to be had about conservation. They're cancelling, thank God, the New Year's Eve celebrations. What a waste of time and energy they are anyway. Stupid holiday. Everyone's standing out in the main square in minus 30 fucking
New Year's Eve is a stupid holiday?
The acoustics are awful. So there's this push all around Europe to cancel any unnecessary use of energy over Christmas, isn't it? And businesses are looking at it seriously for the first time probably ever. They're really saying, where can we cut here? And I'm going to put it out there, guys, right? I think it's a useful exercise for Western democracies to be able to train themselves for a time of crisis by actually using the levers that we have in our political systems that make these great systems, which is a price-based market,
We're getting deep here.
Yeah, we are getting deep here because Europe has really reacted to the fact that we're not getting Russian gas this winter, haven't we? We've got gas prices were so low recently and the tanks were so full that the sellers were paying people to fucking take it off them just so they could send the ships home. That's a good situation compared to where we thought we'd be 6 months ago.
Sure.
We've gone from something like 300, and they price it per metric fucking ton or something. Like it's gone from 300 or 400 euro back down to 110. I mean, it'll probably go up. The good weather is helping us here big time. But people all around the world are kind of having a competition now saying, did I really need the heating in October last year? Actually, no, not really. Most of us live in very well insulated houses now. Why do we turn the heating on so often? I'm always saying that to my wife. It's naturally warm in our building. It's an A-rated building. Like it keeps all the heat inside. So, I think we could go pretty much the whole year without using it. What are you doing to save the world, Josh?
I'm wearing an extra jumper.
Nice.
That was Jimmy Carter's advice to the whole country in 1978 during the height of stagflation.
Yeah.
Mr. President, what should we do? He says, put on an extra jumper. He was trying to be helpful, but of course it came across the wrong way, and unfortunately,
well, to be fair, he's still alive, isn't he?
This is true. Politicians are so guarded in their.
But just one more thing, I'm sure that the Lidls and the Biedronkas are monitoring the situation because they would love to save. Even 5-7% of a huge number is still a very big number. Netto is the what's the expression? The canary in the coal mine here. Maybe if it works for them, maybe it'll work for others. And I'm sure shopping centers and cinemas. Think of what it takes to heat a cinema complex, for example, in the winter. So even if they could set the thermostat, do we have thermostats these days? How does it work?
Yeah.
If they could let the temperature go maybe 1-2 degrees lower than they normally would in the winter, maybe they'll do that. But this has to be on your radar if you're a responsible financial manager of any huge company, you have to be watching
That's
this.
another one I don't get, right? You walk into a shopping centre and the heaters are on, and everyone who's gone to the shopping centre is dressed for the cold, okay? So
True.
the individual stores, I can understand you want to heat them, like customers might be trying on clothes, etc.
You don't want to see your breath in the store.
Why on earth do shopping centres heat the main foyers and areas? I'm convinced it's just to sell fucking space in their
Actually, Dave, I'm not sure that I totally agree with that, because I think that, like,
because you're a skinny fella.
No. It's because, I mean, somewhere like Galeria Krakowska, for example, which has a massive car park on the top of it, and you see people walking around that shop. I mean, I know it's not just a Polish thing. It happens in the UK. It happens in the United States as well. But there are people who dress up to go to the mall, and you see people like walking around in the heated comfort of the shopping centre in just kind of the sort of clothes that they would wear at a wedding or something like that, but not with like great coats and stuff, because they've come by car. You get out the car in the car park and get in the same with Galeria Kazimierz.
Cold, like, you've got the thermal heat coming out of all of the other businesses, all of the machines and refrigerators turned on, all of the people adding heat inside there.
Well, that's probably what's happening anyway, isn't it?
You walk through those doors, right? You get hit with the air curtain.
Yes.
Now, that is expensive to run, man. An air curtain like that uses a lot of power. Like, and is it necessary? It's really just there to make the guest feel a little bit like, warm. And now 2 minutes later, I'm sweating. What am I going to do with my jacket? I don't know. I'm going to have to lug it around.
Well, I think it slightly serves the function of acting as a kind of invisible barrier for the warm air that's inside the shopping centre as a whole. It kind of, stops that kind of spilling out.
Wouldn't everybody be perfectly fine if let's say Galeria Krakowska and shopping centers across the country, if they had a notice in the window, dear customers, in light of the current situation, in order to preserve our extended shopping hours, we have to control how much we're spending on heating the facility. We hope you understand. I think people would be okay with that.
Yeah. A nice public service announcement.
Yeah.
Just with something like that, and at the end, and go, and fuck Putin.
Yeah, it's all his fault. Let's move on to something else. Actually, Dave mentioned a minute ago, New Year's Eve celebrations. We learned this week that Krakow's annual New Year's Eve celebration in the main square, concert stage and all the rest of it, fireworks, has been called off officially. Nobody's really surprised by this.
I kind of stepped on that earlier, didn't I?
It's okay. People, our cities across the continent, around the world really, are doing the same thing. It's just not a good look these days to spend huge amounts of money on this kind of thing. So it's going to be a relatively quiet New Year's Eve. Anything lost, Dave? You're not going to cry over this, I think.
No, as I've already said, it's a complete waste of time, effort, energy, and money, and it just draws an enormous and inappropriate, frankly, approaching dangerous some years amount of people onto the main square. There's a lot of narrow alleys off the side of that. I mean, if you had, say, a prank, like, say, something that sounded like an explosive, people panicked and all rushed.
You mean like a firework?
Well, let's just say for some reason a big fight broke out, something like that, which has happened many times.
We just saw in Seoul, South Korea, a couple of days ago. This
is an absolute.
This kind of thing happens.
Oh God, yeah, it's horrible.
It is in my mind. I was watching the tragic news reports today, and yeah, something like that. I've always felt, having run a bar on the main square, it was a little bit of a stupid idea encouraging that many people with that much drink in them. Everyone gets drunk on New Year's Eve, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you're asking for trouble. It's no loss, and as I was saying earlier, I don't think it hurts any society with the current things going on in the world. We can't be beholden to other people's energy. It's one of the clearest things we've learned now in the last 3 years, that energy independence matters. It's focused people's mind. It's even overcome, climate change in terms of being the number one topic in this area. And it's gotten some people around the table. And I think it's going to actually mean big things for nuclear, for cleaner gas plants, for the type of practical baseload technology that can stand up beside, solar and renewables, which will also play their part. But, hopefully it will bring together the EU into a sensible, unified energy policy. It's always seems to be one of the greatest own goals and missed opportunities of the EU, not to have a shared nuclear commission that uses the same reactor model, design, regulation, transport systems, where staff...
We're going into our next story, by the way, Dave.
Staff could be interchangeably recruited easily from one sector to the other. and really scale up nuclear the way the French did, because that's the main objection you hear from the clever dicks who don't know anything about it on the news, isn't it? Oh, it's too expensive, it's too this. The United States did it the wrong way. I'm sorry, John, this is where you need a bit of socialism in your life, because the United States is such a free market that it has every type of reactor under the sun operating in the US, because all the big boys competed with each other. There's very little, a generation of reactor was built everywhere, whereas the French didn't do
it's
that.
been ages since the last one was built. When was
The
last
EDF
one?
had complete control. They could requisition land. They could set up schools for physicists and engineers. And what happened? They drove the fucking cost per unit through the floor. French energy was never cheaper. And, you know, it still to this day provides over 95%, doesn't it, of their domestic energy output or something?
No, it's 78%.
So,
but I mean, they export electricity. But there is another thing, actually, is that most of, if not all of France's nuclear power stations were built before the current kind of generally accepted worldwide regulations. And the reason why building a nuclear power plant is so expensive is because of the massive regulatory burden that is imposed. It is not actually physically expensive to build a nuclear power station, but getting all the boxes ticked and getting all the various kind of inspectorates,
That's partially one of the reasons why your regulatory hurdles are ridiculous, and they take so many years that even the ones being announced now in Poland, in Pomerania, are only supposed to be open in 2026.
No, they're not opened in starting construction.
Exactly.
Yeah,
of course they have to examine the effects on every type of squirrel and insect. Yeah. Survey the site, but I would disagree in a way that, you know, large nuclear reactors are extremely precision-made parts at an enormous scale. They're very difficult to make. It can be expensive. They can have a lot of cost overruns in a legitimate way as well, you know. So,
well, it's true. I mean, all the cost burden is up front, really. I mean, it's like building the thing, but once it's built, it virtually costs nothing.
oh, look, if you were to say to me, Dave, look, this nuclear reactor, this one-off nuclear reactor, I've done the sums, they don't add up, I wouldn't fight you over it. What I'm saying is, if we embrace it at a much bigger scale, the economies of scale of having the same system, that's why I use the French analogy. There's absolutely no reason the EU couldn't have put something together like that, you know, an energy commission. And let's just say, Josh, that maybe if everyone in the UK had seen clean energy provided over the last 15 years at really cheap prices, they'd have said, that EU is good for something. Maybe we'll give them another chance.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, and it's not just the fault of the EU. I mean, this is governments around the world are kind of absolutely riddled with people who have totally bought into the very powerful anti-nuclear lobby that has been underway since, I think, the late 1950s, really.
Anyway, we've got what? We've got now Westinghouse plants approved in Pomerania. 2 to go ahead straight away, possibly a third to follow on. 3 reactors in each. These are the large Westinghouse new generation reactors that are being approved in the United States. It's an exciting moment for...
There's also, actually, I mean, I think we mentioned this a few months ago, but there was something that I think it's Orlen and whatever, they're part of some bigger kind of energy conglomerate, but they're actually kind of themselves investing in... kind of a commercial nuclear project, which is aside from anything the government is mandating.
Well, look, companies absolutely would do it if they thought it wasn't that difficult to do it regulatory. That's why I'm saying
they could make money from it.
Yeah, I mean, the likes of Facebook or Google, what would a small modular reactor be to them if they knew over 30 years in that data center, which they'd costed out for 30 years anyway, would pay for itself and give them complete energy independence from the grid? They'd bite your hand off to be allowed to do it.
Yeah.
So, New Year's Eve in the Krakow main square is where we were before Dave went rushing into the next story without letting me introduce it. Let me try to rewind here a little bit. Let me just wrap up Krakow's main square.
It's like we've stolen your trick or treat, John.
Isn't it interesting how many people have some version of the same story? And I think both
invented trick or treat.
I think
trick or treat, TM.
I think both of you have the same story. Isn't it weird how many people have a story about how they went to the Krakow main square once for New Year's Eve and never went back?
Yeah, the first time you see a glass fly over your head, you're like, you gotta go home.
I just don't see it. Maybe I'm just too old and boring, but I don't see it.
The problem with New Year's Eve is everybody wants to go out on the same night, so it creates this huge demand. And yeah, okay, it's good to be in a busy bar or restaurant, the good buzz, the good atmosphere, you know, you're in the happening place. Doesn't feel like that on New Year's. You know, everywhere it's just packed because it's New Year's. So, you know, first of all, you're suspicious that you've been overcharged. You've been charged on the door for some bar that's not even giving you anything for the money. It's annoying.
Yeah. And the flying glass and the flying bottles, the full bottles, the freezing temp, the driving snow, it kind of adds to the, you know, the second thoughts you might have about going out for New Year's Eve. But every year, any number of people are happy to take the place of people who don't want to go. And so I don't get it. But
I always get a takeaway, and instead of one nice bottle of wine, I have two.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, the next headline was Poland this week announced that they're going to build a nuclear power plant.
Come on.
I don't know if you know anything about this, Dave, but Poland selected an American partner, Westinghouse.
You kind of mentioned it.
When did I kind of mention it?
You did mention it.
You did mention it, yeah. Even before you started on the New Year's.
You were teeing me up. I thought it was like, you know, you were...
All right, let's just state it plainly. Poland, they selected the Westinghouse over a Korean company and I think a French company.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Location to be decided. Supposed to go online producing energy in 2026?
No. Construction is due to start.
Excuse me. Construction starts in 2026.
Likely to go online in 2032.
Yeah, like Dave said, they'll have to do 100,000 environmental impact studies and this and that and this and that. I'm curious, Josh.
I mean, they should be well-planned nuclear plants. Let's be clear about this. I mean,
by which time Vladimir Putin will be 80 years old.
Yeah. When they're picking a location, it has to be close enough to an urban center where they can get a qualified workforce. But there are also rules about how far they have to be away from population centers for obvious safety reasons. Must be hard to get just the right place.
Politicians put these rules in place. They don't make any sense, right? There's no reason the exclusion zones have to be that big. I mean, if the fucking thing blows up, you're in trouble anyway.
Exclusion zone. That just sounds terrible.
I would love to see a kind of social experiment run where nuclear plants were able to offer free energy. They could say there's 5 sites in this city. Whoever votes to have, most people vote to have us have the plant there, get free energy for those, 50,000 people in this borough. I have a feeling people would bite your hand off to live beside the nuclear plant if their power was free.
I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, of course, the usual suspects would squeal, but that's just bribing the electorate, which is what every single politician always does.
It would make people make a clearer value judgment. They read up on it and they go, actually, I've nothing to be worried about. Yes, I'd love a house that gives me free power right beside the nuclear plant.
See also fracking.
Do you think, can we go back big picture here, Dave? Do you think that given the current inflation situation, the energy crisis, et cetera, that has given politicians a little bit of political cover for ignoring the Green lobby and their objections to nuclear power?
Yes, I do believe a lot of politicians who know better, who know that while there's no reason renewables can't be part of a strategy, there's no way that we can ever solve the problem of replacing Europe's thousands of coal plants without thinking big in terms of base load as well. I think there's secretly a lot of support for a large-scale nuclear program. That's why I was giving my ambitious little speech about the EU earlier. You're right. We've reached the kind of moment in time with Putin's outrageous behaviour where finally people's minds are focused on energy policy and how it's a geopolitical tool in war.
There's 2 parts to this. Maybe one part, Josh, is that the politicians are not as afraid of ignoring the Green lobby. On the other hand of the equation, the Green lobby doesn't have as much confidence in making these arguments because they know that I think the public sentiment is not on their side when it comes to criticizing.
Well, I think also there are increasingly people within the Green lobby who are, I mean, not just privately, but even publicly admitting that actually, if we want a so-called carbon-free or reduced carbon future, that nuclear is absolutely the way to go. And I mean, you've got prominent environmental journalists like George Monbiot who writes in The Guardian in the UK, who came out actually several years ago now saying, listen, I've been opposed to nuclear almost as a sort of, because that's from my side of the fence, the standard position, he said, but actually the more I look at it, you know, it stacks up really well as a low carbon energy source, and we should be frankly focusing more of our attention on nuclear. And I think this is, you know, the tide of opinion is changing. And I think, you know, just about time too, really, because to be honest, I mean, since I don't know, like, the whole thing kind of was pretty much put in a moratorium from the mid-'80s onwards, with 3 Mile Island and then obviously Chernobyl.
Quick question for you, Josh. You might know this. This is OT, but we all know that Germany the last couple of years has been busy kind of castrating itself in terms of its energy production capacity. Are they like destroying their nuclear plants or simply switching them off?
Olaf Scholz is actually reopening mothballed nuclear plants as of the last couple of weeks.
No doubt they'll quietly be recommissioned. The Germans know what they're doing if they're put their engineers in give them the right nod. Look, that's what really irritates me about it, that we're running around looking for new technologies and we've got this. I mean, imagine being alive when the atom was split. Imagine how astonishing that was to read about in the paper. The essential power of the fucking universe opened up under mankind's hand. Now, we went wrong building bombs with it, scaring the shit out of everyone, some bad reactor designs. But it's like kind of saying that early motor cars should be as safe as the cars we have today, We just gave up on this.
There's a learning curve here.
Gave up on the solution to all of our fucking problems. And it just drives me crazy because what it truly needs is what we're always banging on about. International global cooperation. This is the type of interdependence that stops war, stops famine, gives a bit of stability to the planet. Can you imagine how useful a tool it would be to engage even rogue regimes if we could finally say, well, look, come to the table and we'll give you unlimited clean power.
I mean, what's, I think, from my point of view, kind of also very sad is that, so a good 50, 55 years on, in the late 1960s, the world was at the very start of, like a technological revolution, really. We had the promise of space travel. We had the promise of cheap, essentially infinite energy from nuclear power. Okay, there was stuff like Vietnam going on and, not such good things politically. But there was this general, certainly amongst scientists and so forth, there was this, this was like, when I was a very, very, very small child, and one had the sense that the future was, cheap and abundant, and, electricity would be virtually free, that, you could, the third world would just be lifted out of poverty just because it wouldn't have to spend money on...
Just look at all the wondrous things we're inventing now. Applications that make your pizza more expensive, cold, and delivered later than ever. Scooters that wankers ride around the city. Look at
what a time to be alive.
Completely right, man. It's like the embrace of what we consider progress now. We focus so much on software and individual technologies.
And social engineering.
Yeah, and communications. Look, that'll be, when people look back in 1,000 years at our age, that'll of course be the great advance in communications. All right, and it is astonishing. But we've kind of forgot how important heavy engineering is. And that's why we all gawp and fucking wonder at what China's able to do. I'm not saying that they haven't messed it up on occasions. I'm sure we're going to hear about some high-speed railways to the middle of nowhere soon. But, I'm done.
Yeah.
We learned this week that LOT Polish Airlines, national flag carrier, are they the national flag? Wait a second. Are they still owned by the government? I forgot. They were, at least 49% maybe. Anyway, doesn't matter. They announced this week they're expanding their already impressive fleet with some 737 MAXs.
Are these the ones that crash?
Not anymore, Josh.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was just once, Josh.
Oh, we fixed it. Right.
Dave has a 737 MAX story.
Do I? Oh, yeah, sorry. I did. It's not like you kind of set it up like now it's a big story. It wasn't really a big story, but
you told me it was a big story.
I've been on a 737 MAX, a Ryanair recently. They've taken possession of their first ones recently, and they did something so Ryanair, right? They're quite comfortable. They're a little bit bigger, the planes, but of course Ryanair used the extra space to stuff in as many seats as possible, and they now have this extraordinary new feature. The flight attendants have to sit in front of the passenger in the middle row, two of them. If the flight is fully staffed, I suppose that varies, between like 4, 5 and 6 people. And I had the pleasure of meeting a very sound young Portuguese air steward, nice guy he was, can't remember his name, but he just sits in front of me. I'm in the emergency row, and I'm like, dude, they don't make you sit with the punters. He's like, yeah, we hate these planes. So I don't think they're popular with the crew of Ryanair.
Was it a nice ride though for you?
I mean, there's not much difference in personal comfort between the 737 and the 737 MAX. I ride Ryanair all the time.
What's Max about it then?
It's bigger, but you wouldn't really notice it. It's not much bigger. It's more efficient. That's why it's been such a hit, isn't it? Fuel efficiency.
Yeah, it's the engines, I think. Much more fuel
I'll
efficient.
still take my Dreamliner over anything. Dreamliners are not short.
No, they're not
at
short
all.
haul. No.
You sound confused. That's completely correct, John. Yes,
Yeah, but
you
wait-
would not use the largest jets in the world.
That's not the largest jet in the world. What are you talking about? Dreamliner is far from the largest jet in the
One of
world.
the largest jets in the world.
What's the cutoff?
A380 is bigger.
What's the cutoff between short haul and long haul flights?
Good question.
Oh,
Master emerges in John.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have no idea. What would you guess?
I reckon something that's like longer than 3 hours is probably long haul. Less than 3 hours is short haul.
Grab my laptop.
Three seems kind of. I don't know. Is there any?
How long
European-
does it take to fly from New York to Los Angeles? Would you consider that
6
long?
hours.
Long. That's long haul. Then.
Yeah, that's long haul.
Oh, listen to this, right? Short haul is a flight lasting anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours. Medium haul.
Oh,
Medium haul.
Oh, medium haul.
Oh, medium.
Less talked about little brother of
Yeah.
The redheaded stepchild.
is defined by flights lasting between 3 and 6 hours. And lastly, long haul flights are those extend beyond 6 hours.
Okay,
So even Dublin, New York barely qualifies, or London, New York.
that's like London, New York is like 5.5, 6. Yeah.
Still,
He says.
Dreamliner is the only time I've ever been impressed by a plane.
Sydney, however, that's
About this last week,
Did
literally.
we?
yeah.
I'm still impressed by it.
A380.
A380. That's the Dreamliner.
No, that's the Airbus one, which is even bigger and which is still flying despite reports
been
of
on
its
it.
imminent
Not been on
demise.
it.
There's a lot of them out there and they're popular. It's just the people aren't buying anymore.
But the regular 737 is that still the workhorse of Ryanair,
We
right?
spoke about this on the last episode.
We did not talk. What are you talking
supposed to
about?
steer us calmly through, waters of chat uncharted, for fuck's sake.
Says the guy who stepped
Do
on
your
the first
fucking
4.
job, John.
Says the guy who stepped on the first 4 stories by going everywhere, wherever he wanted to.
I'm an unpredictable and spiky analyst.
I did
Keep
not
it on
ask you
your
last
toes.
week, but I'm curious about it now. Isn't the 737 the Ryanair workhorse? That's
Yeah,
like
of
this
course. Yeah,
737.
yeah.
Okay.
That's the one. I think that's the best selling jet in the world. That's your medium, short haul kind of king,
Oh.
It's not the Airbus equivalent.
Who put the story up here about the Polish-Belarusian border?
Oh, I did. Yeah, they've built this magnificent, beautiful wall,
Walls don't work, Josh. Don't you know?
and
Create larger, taller ladders.
it is apparently the most secure border in the entire Schengen region. And because there was all this aggravation a while back with Lukashenko kind of promoting kind of people from troubled third world countries, that if they wanted to get it into Europe easily, then he would happily facilitate that by
Right.
getting them to Belarus, and then they could just stroll across the border into Poland and hence into Schengen. And Poland, not surprisingly, reacted quite strongly to this and stepped up its patrols, and has now built and virtually completed an entire kind of, I think, 4.5 meter high. It's like 200 odd kilometers.
enough, yeah.
yeah.
I've seen these fence and other fences like it. They're really scary looking. Lots of pointy bits and metal and kind of,
I think the idea is so you can't easily climb over.
like
it.
hear
an
what me
apocalyptic zombie future. And fine, I get it. You got to keep people out. You do what it takes. But I do have to point out that I'm guessing the people in Brussels who finance this and
Well, no, they're not, are they? That's the thing.
it's not a European thing.
No. It's a Polish thing, and Poland would really quite like some money from Brussels about this. But then that, of course, is a whole other story
I
about
thought that would
Poland. And
be a
it's
given that anything built on the European border would be.
well,
have
you would
Brussels
think that.
involved
You
somehow.
would think
Let
that.
me
But
tell you my idea.
Go ahead.
Border bushes, right? We super engineer the most thorny type of bush in the world, right?
And they exist. There are some nasty
Yeah.
bushes out there.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen the type,
Oh, cactus bush hybrid.
the type of bush Ron Jeremy wouldn't take on, I mean, we just, imagine, right, you get a system going, right? You got 1,000 miles of border, you plough it, you bush it, you let it grow, all right? And isn't that also like a green
It's
project?
organic.
You're like carbon capture.
Exactly.
You're hitting your targets. Think
green.
about it.
We have a green immigration policy.
Walls are ugly, all right?
yeah.
Or steely and pointy and Barbie. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's all very well when it's land, but what about when there's water, like, a river?
Why are walls shit now, by the way? This is something I really want to talk about, right? in Dublin, you always know you're in one of the wealthier parts of the city because it adhered to the old wall laws. You had to build granite stone walls anytime the government kind of ordered you to surround something, you know. But then, of course,
property lines, or
yeah, exactly. So around Dublin, there's all these gorgeous old granite walls with irregular kind of, you know, pieces and shapes, and it looks like, you know, it's been there for 1,000 years or whatever. And then you see the 70s walls, and it goes all the way down from, you know, Blackrock down to this kind of crappy exposed cinder block in some cases. And you're thinking, that makes a massive difference to the aesthetic quality of the city, the quality of its walls. Why do we build such crappy walls these days?
Well, I'll hazard a guess, and it may just be to do with the cost of the materials involved.
Yeah, and the labour. It's a very skilled job.
Well, yeah, I mean, proper fencing. I mean, you've got to like dig, you know, like deep pilings for the supports. Whether it's, I mean, interesting you make that point, because a lot of people
China builds loads of railways. Where's your new Great Wall?
They've got a great wall. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's often the case, of course, that the expense of the kind of like the substructure of a wall is so great that actually, you know, having some ugly cheap material on the surface or having some nice aesthetically pleasing material on the surface, the differential is not that great.
A pretty wall,
yeah. Well, actually, John, I guess you're involved with walls to an extent at the moment. Are you not? Or is that not something not something that you...
Your house, John?
Well, those kind of walls.
Well, what kind of walls were you thinking of?
Oh, I don't know.
No, I know you're not trying to keep out asylum seekers.
I have no borders and guard towers and barbed wire and searchlights and stuff.
People presenting themselves at your back door and say, "I'm seeking asylum."
Get the fuck out.
Pink Floyd reference incoming.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know. I missed that one completely. But I've seen some of the walls, like Hungary and Serbia, I think, Greece and Turkey and Iraq. I mean, there are some seriously impressive walls that are just scary to look at, and those aren't controversial, but.
I think the EU's not terribly happy about the wall that Hungary's built on the Serbian border, which is weird because Serbia is not in the EU. So, but I mean, they don't like Hungary.
It was against the transitory population.
Well, they don't like the Hungarian government either, do they? So.
Let's do one more story. They're about Poles want a bigger army, but they don't want to pay for it.
Yeah. That's basically, I mean, it's, you know, a very pithy headline, doesn't really need much greater sort of explication.
Yeah, everything's there in the
headline. When asked in opinion polls, something like 74% of Poles were in favour of having an enlarged military. Not least, of course, because of the current situation in Ukraine. But I think, you know, this kind of ties in with the much longer standing kind of sort of paranoia about the Russians' intentions towards Poland in a more general sense. However, when the same survey posed the question in terms of like, you know, this will mean, you know, costing this and, you know,
hell no.
Let's come out of the clouds here.
Hell no.
Right? Let's just talk about something very practical here. We've seen what a well-equipped, motivated army defending their homeland can do against a supposed superpower. Every country in Europe should be saying, you know what, actually, if it came to the worst, we can stand and fight on our own and we can win. All right, and that's a fact. Any Western democracy that can't invest 2 or 3% in its own defence should look itself in the eye and say, shame on you. Because what do you really want to spend it on? Tax breaks for yourself.
Let me ask you. Yeah. Let me take a different angle on this. I'm curious with the Irish situation. Like we talked about before.
In the middle of nowhere, we've always just chanced our arm. We get away with it. We're neutral.
We talked about before about how one of the difficulty in maybe expanding the army here in Poland is the image, the reputation of what it means to become a soldier, making a soldier your real professional commitment.
That's what I mean.
In Ireland, how is it common? You know, do people say I'm going to the army, and your parents are happy about it? The people are impressed, or is it something?
It's very prestigious in Ireland, I would say.
So it's not something that the lower end of a social scale would do because they have no other choices.
Well-respected profession.
Okay.
Irish troops it's a small force, but they're well known for serving in places like Lebanon and.
So there's some respect and prestige involved here.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the army guys have had a tough time over the last 30 years. I think their conditions and pay have been improved a lot, but they're certainly not seen as some overprivileged section of the civil service, let me tell you. They work hard for their money and they provide a valuable service. I mean, Ireland's got one of them kind of understaffed slightly overlooked type of military coast guards. I mean, the Coast Guard is one thing it always annoys me we don't invest more in.
When you're an island, it's particularly important. Yeah,
it is really. Anyway.
Well, look, I mean, I've got a couple of observations about this Polish situation, and I think I can't help but think that many Poles will look at what's been happening in Ukraine and thinking, well, way to go, guys! Like, you're certainly putting up a spirited fight, and should Putin or Russia try this on us, you can be damn sure we're going to put up just as much. In fact, we are not going to be out bravaried by the Ukrainians. We're going to be just as damn kind of resistant, and you can better believe it. And I'm going to add something further. I think in terms of expanding the military, I don't know that there really is a need to expand the regular military. I think what would be useful, and I think that people could get on board with, is to massively expand the reservists, i.e. people who have an amount of military training, who maintain it, a few weekends a year. They have weapons training and so forth. They have, the knowledge of how to do it, but they carry on with their regular day-to-day jobs. And so you have this vast potential force of people who are at least partially trained, who can be called upon in emergency. And of course, you go to, in Switzerland, literally every male Swiss citizen is a reservist and has a weapon. I mean, Switzerland is one of the most heavily armed countries in the world.
Dave, digital technology or boots on the ground with your military budget?
Well, I mean, you can't ignore cyber warfare. You best believe, John, that's the most ridiculous military question of them all. Because if you want an effective army, you got to be good at everything. That's what all history of warfare proves. A holistic approach, John.
Well, given kind of Poland's fairly preeminent position in terms of computer games and computer programming in general, I suspect that and historically the case. I mean, as we all know, except for Hollywood, it was, of course, Polish technicians and whizzes, mathematicians or whatever, who originally cracked the Enigma code.
And I wanted to add earlier as well that I do believe, you wouldn't have to go as far as going back to mandatory subscription for military-age people.
Conscription,
excuse me. I think with the current emotions, a campaign to sign people up on a voluntary basis would be pretty successful.
I think it would be massively successful.
I think you're right. I think Poland needs a few more people to know how to fire a rifle properly. If nothing else, that could help us take on the menace of the pigs.
Hey, look, I'd do it, and I'm kind of way too old, and I'm not a Polish citizen, but,
The pay and the conditions need a major upgrade, I think, but I just think that...
Infantryman days are over, Josh.
Yes,
leadership position, maybe.
Josh shows up with his guitar case, like in fucking what was that? Dust Till Dawn.
Il Mariachi.
Troops need entertainment as well, so there is that. Auxiliary kind of support staff.
Nothing. The Bob Hope role.
Nothing wrong with that. On that note, I think we'll bring things to a close. Thanks for listening, everybody. KrakCast.pl is the website. Check it out. All of our back episodes are there. And we'll see you next time on the news. Bye.